Something changed after the big flood in Fontaine, and I think, oh no, it's not that all the Fontainians dissolve into water because, well, it's not that. It's the narrative about the Fatui and how travelers perceive them. For once, they're not the bad guys. Starting with Lini and Lynette, who were the first Fontainians we met and eventually defended in court, and ending with Arlecchino, who adopted us to be one of her children and managed to obtain the Gnosis without violence. Well, in the end, at least. In fact, Neuvillette called it a diplomatic gift for coming to Fontaine's aid during the disaster. And that makes me wonder, will the Fatui eventually be our allies further down the line, or were they in fact never the bad guys and it was simply the result of oversimplification of the early chapter writing? The answer is yes and no. A little bit of both, really. Pretty much a reflection of where they stand throughout the story so far. In the gray area. So, consider this video an analysis of past storylines with a sprinkle of future plot speculation based on current evidence in the game. As always, the references mentioned in this video will be listed down below so you can check those out later for further reading. Now, let's dive in. You see, I started listing down all the things they had done in the previous 4 nations, to find patterns. For their role in Fontaine to be an outlier, ideally, their modus operandi before was different. But I didn't have to go beyond Liyue to realize that my assumption was quite wrong, actually. What they did in Fontaine was simply a repetition of old patterns, only this time less violence and more subtle and in tune with their good guys role. So let's start with Mondstadt. Here, our very first introduction to the organization was via this Neshnayan diplomat who pressured Jin to allow them to shoot down the Valin. Jin disagreed, of course, disgusted even by the mere suggestion and their way of addressing one of the 4 winds as monster. However, as the narrative had decided from the start, the villain in the Mondstadt arc was the Abyss Order. The Fatui was more of a third party who had their own agenda and weaponized the current crisis to get what they wanted. Corrupting the Valin and turning him against Barbados was not their goal, the Gnosis was. Which, when you think about it, rhymes with what Arlecchino did in Fontaine. She requested an audience with Furina to discuss about child's situation, and then pressured Furina to grant her an access to the Fortress of Meripit. Later we learned that she needed the access to investigate the Forbidden Zone to see if that's where the Hydra Gnosis was hidden. So, same pattern. There's an issue in the nation and they use it to pressure the nation's leader to get them closer to the nation's Gnosis. The event in Mondstadt was followed by that one limited event that most players didn't get to experience because it happened all the way back in the patch 1.1, the Unreconciled Stars, which also marked our first meeting with Scaramouche, the 6th of the Fatui Harbinger. The first time we crossed paths with him, he appeared to be friendly and helpful, trying to help an unconscious NPC near Wangshuin and all that. If it wasn't for Mona, we wouldn't have known that he had been trying to find the perfect opportunity to kill the traveler, for whatever reason it might be. We also learned that the Fatui had little to no interest in Leonard's constellation or in the side effect of the meteorites. Their one goal coming there was to investigate the stars and that's it, really. Which, by the way, led to one of the biggest lore bombs that was never to be mentioned ever again until Sumeru. Similarly, in Liyue, we met Tartaglia, who was quick to rescue us from the Millelith and then offered to help us clear our name because we somehow got mixed into the list of suspects of Rex Lapis' murderer. Somehow, we could do that to an Archon who had already died as he was descending from the sky from where we were standing on the ground, many meters away from the sky. Just don't even get me started, okay? The Liyue arc has one of the weaker motives, if not the weakest. Anyways, just as in Unreconciled Stars, we were shown how the Fatui would do just about anything as long as they could achieve their goal. In Liyue, Tartaglia found out that the Geonosis was not within the Exuvia and concluded that Rex Lapis was still alive. He then resorted to summoning Osiel, an ancient god sealed beneath Guyun Stone Forest, believing that a threat that massive, a threat that could obliterate the entirety of Liyue Harbor, would definitely bring Rex Lapis out of hiding. So, the Fatui would do just about anything to achieve their goal. They would pull down constellations from the sky, causing people to go into deep slumber if that meant they could learn the truth about the stars and the sky. They would help clear our name if that meant bringing them closer to the Geonosis. They would summon ancient gods, threatening the life of an entire nation if that meant they could lure an Archon out of hiding. They would do all that, feeling no remorse whatsoever. Which, once again, was repeated in Fontaine. Arlecchino mentioned that she tried to kill Furina in her attempt to steal the Hydra Gnosis. "Oh, you could shout it from the rooftops and nobody would care," she said ever so casually. It was almost comical, except not in the haha funny way, because here was a literal assassin standing right in front of the traveler talking about an attempted murder like she's discussing whether it was gonna rain that day. In response, Traveler and Paimon were shocked, but not enough, I think, and I believe that has everything to do with our earlier conversation with the twins after the trial in Act 1. We'll get back to that in a bit. Just keep it in your back pocket for now because it's important. Now, while we had seen the extent the Fatui would go to achieve their goal in the previous 2 nations, in Inazuma we learned that the limit was basically limitless. They orchestrated the Vision Hunt Decree, ignited war between the Shogunate and the Resistance Army while slowly killing the army with delusions. Even Scaramouche got very close to his killing the Traveler just because he wanted to agenda if not for Yamiko's interference. And this limit was further pushed as we arrived in Sumeru. Enter Dottore, the second of the Fatui Harbinger who experimented with the creation of a god using Scaramouche as the host, the Electronosis and the Dream of Sumeru people as the battery. Unlike Inazuma that needed to be destroyed from within, Sumeru was already rotten to begin with the moment the sages wouldn't acknowledge Kusanali as the successor of Rukkhadevata. It was much easier to bring the nation to Fatui's side. So, on the surface, you might think that how they did things in Fontaine seemed different than in Inazuma and Sumeru. In Fontaine, they were not trying to use their position to bring the nation to side with the Fatui, right? There's no pattern whatsoever. But that is simply not true. Arlecchino was just more subtle. She didn't ignite wars between the people and the Hydro Archon, didn't conspire with Neuvillette to restore his Dragonhood power so he could run havoc in Fontaine, none of that, because she knew that wouldn't work. The people of Fontaine loved and adored Furina. They still do. Neuvillette is unlike Apep, for example. He is unlike the other dragon sovereigns. He explicitly mentioned that restoring his power was not the solution to save Fontaine. Violence wouldn't work. Arlecchino knew that. So what did she do? She befriended the people. She got Lini and Lynette to gain our trust until eventually we ever so willingly joined forces with them and helped with their investigation in the Fortress of Merapit. We even readily defended them in court from day one. She approached Navia, gained her trust, and helped out throughout the crisis in Poisson. She went as far as lending resources for the elaborate plan to put Furina on trial. After all, they would do just about anything to achieve their goal, right? If they could do the most evil thing imaginable, is it so hard to imagine that they would pretend to be the good guys to achieve that very same goal? Wasn't it exactly what we saw the twins practicing in the Overture teaser? So, to answer the question, were the Fatui in fact never the bad guys? It depends. If the situation demands it, they could be the good guys, the most reliable ones at that. On the flip side, if the chaos demands it, they could be the most unhinged bad guys in the story. Now, here's the thing. Remember when I said that Traveler and Paimon were not shocked enough when Arlecchino said that she tried to murder Furina and it's all because of our conversation with the twins in Act 1? Lini told the story of how Lynette was once sold to some rich man and was eventually rescued by Arlecchino. He described the rescue in such great detail. Arlecchino in the room, the floor and walls painted red from the blood of that rich man. While the story might serve as an explanation as to why the twins decided to join Arlecchino and by extension the Fatui, what it subconsciously did to us was painting Arlecchino in a good light. She killed to save Lynette. She killed the bad guy and protected the weak. Perhaps to some extent, that is true. She does care about her children. A quick look into Fremina's character story would confirm this, and perhaps that is exactly why it was unnerving that she tried to kill Furina in cold blood. One second, she was telling Traveler that she would definitely go to the Fortress of Merapit had Lini just asked her to, and the next she was like, ooh, by the way, I tried to kill the Hydro Archon in my attempt to take away her Gnosis. Turns out the Gnosis was not with her, so I changed my mind. I'm paraphrasing here, but you get the idea. On top of that, we just joined her tea party with Furina, which pretty much worked in her favor as well. We saw how she urged Furina to solve the prophecy, and how incapable and not ready Furina was with the solution. While Arlecchino, a mere human, was very concerned with the safety of the people in Fontaine, Furina, the Archon of the nation, still took her sweet time to have tea parties, attended trivial trials and performances instead of devoting her time 24/7 to try to solve the prophecy. From the point of view of an outsider, Arlecchino's action was justified. Her trying to kill the Hydro Archon was not the most evil thing to do when said Archon had seemingly been neglecting her duty to protect the nation. Just as we were justified to corner Furina and get her on trial, really, the only difference is that we team up with the Fontainians because we genuinely wanted to save the nation, while Arlecchino, well, she wanted something in return, didn't she?
As such, do not be troubled by this token of our sincerity. Perhaps one day, you'll also be able to help me in the same way.
Nothing to commit right now though, she said to Traveler on a separate occasion, but perhaps one day, she told Navia. We don't know when, we don't know what dire situation she might get herself into in the future, but one day. She's buying our allegiance now for a favor in the future. So despite Navia already giving a pass, already putting her trust in Arlecchino, I still cannot fully trust Arlecchino. No, sorry Navia, I just cannot. I don't know what she's up to, but there's something. I mean, think about it, right? Why did she care so much about the prophecy? Sure, she cared about her children and the orphanage was in Fontaine, but if that was all the reason and motivation to stop the prophecy, there was a simpler solution to that. Relocate. Move the base of the House of the Hearts to Snezhnaya, for example. Just like what Charlotte said, leave, escape the nation. See, I just don't think Arlecchino ever genuinely cared about the fate of Fontaine. She simply wanted to get hold of the Gnosis. It was all an act, and perhaps there is some truth to what Wanderer said about her. She is a wolf in sheep's clothing. But the front that she put up, caring for the fate of Fontaine, that worked. It's the classic "the enemy of my enemy is my friend" idea. Traveler, the Fatui, and Fontainians ended up working together because they shared one common goal, trying to stop the prophecy. Which brings us to the very first question of this video. Will the Fatui eventually be our allies further down the line? Well, in the aftermath of Fontaine Archon Quest, I would say there is a higher chance of that now more than ever. Before Fontaine, what we knew of Tsaritsa's plan was that she wanted to collect the Gnosis. We knew that she was planning to rebel against the Divine, the Heavenly Principle. But how exactly she was planning to do that, that was something that we didn't know of. That was until Skirk revealed that the Gnosis were created from the remains of the third Descender. Combined with the experiment that Dottore conducted during Sumeru Archon Quest, we might have a working theory on Tsaritsa's plan and why it may involve the Traveler and the importance of bringing them to side with the Fatui. See, out of the 5 Archon quests we've experienced, Sumeru stands out like a sore thumb in terms of the Fatui involvement and their method in obtaining the Gnosis. Unlike in other nations where their plan resulted in them getting the Gnosis, what they did in Sumeru, creating a new god to replace Lancelot Kusanali, might have cost them not just 1, but 2 Gnosis. If the plan worked out, Scaramouche would have been the new god of Sumeru powered by the Electro-Gnosis, while the Dendro-Gnosis would have still been used to power up the Akasha Terminal, which was not ideal. I mean, Tartaglia was sent to Inazuma to track down Scaramouche who was running away with the Electro-Gnosis. Their number one goal is to collect the Gnosis, so why would they offer such a collaboration with the sages that would cost them 2 of the pieces required by their majesty the Tsaritsa? The answer to that is pretty simple. The creation of a new god in Sumeru was never the end goal for them. It was merely an experiment. Dottore said as much when Nahida asked about it. But experiment of what, you might ask? What were they trying to learn out of creating a god powered by a Gnosis? What could they possibly achieve from that? You know where I'm going with this, right? I think they were experimenting on how powerful a human-created Gnosis-powered god could be, which then might help them to estimate the amount of power 7 Gnosis combined would generate, what it might look like. Perhaps something akin to the Traveler before their power was sealed away by the sustainer of the Heavenly Principle? That of a Descender, perhaps? Because what is an experiment if not a trial for something of a grander scale? Now, double that amount. Enter our beloved MC who is on a journey across Tivat to find their sibling, the sibling who got sealed away by the sustainer of the Heavenly Principle. See, it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend idea all over again. Tsaritsa wants to rebel against the Divine, the Heavenly Principle. Traveler wants to find the sustainer of the Heavenly Principle. And not to make it about Furina again, but we have now arrived in Fontaine and learned that the former god of justice believed that restoring the Hydro Sovereign's power, stolen by the Heavenly Principle by the way, was a form of justice itself. The one god who was fated to cry alone on her throne while her people dissolved into water decided to rebel against Celestia and destroy the divine throne bestowed upon her so that she could restore the highest authority of Hydro to its rightful owner. And not to say that Traveler can be easily swayed, but knowing that, seeing how these Archons would rather give up either their divinity or their gnosis or both, knowing what it means for Celestia to hold power over human, combined with what the Sustainer did to their sibling, I'm gonna go ahead and make an educated guess that Traveler don't see themselves on the same side as Celestia. Perhaps not to the point that they would support Salisa's plan, not yet, at least, but it's getting there. And now we're 70% of the way, 5 out of 7 nations visited, and teaming up with the organization that once offered to shoot down the Valin, almost destroyed Liyue Harbor, killed Traveler's beloved NPC friend, and created a false god to replace a living one, was probably not in the Traveler's bingo card when they set out on this journey, but here we are now. And this is the question that I would leave with you now. When it eventually happens, when Traveler is fully siding with the Fatui, what would be the tipping point? What would make them fully side with the Fatui? Like, we're talking full-on trusting them here, no defensive stance whatsoever when one of them shows up? I think it would be interesting to find out and see it all unravel. And that's it from me today. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.